Maya finished her 12-hour shift in the emergency room and walked wearily toward the locker room. While other nurses headed home, she quietly opened the hidden compartment behind her locker. The black tactical suit, Kevlar vest, and Special Forces insignia she pulled out revealed the door to a second life no one knew existed. Because Maya Chen wasn't just a nurse. Welcome to the Human Stories channel, where we reveal the extraordinary lives hidden behind ordinary faces. Before we begin, tell us in the comments where in the world you're watching from. And if you've ever suspected someone in your life might be living a double identity. Maya worked the night shift at Denver Mercy Hospital, and to her colleagues, she was the perfect nurse. Quiet, efficient, always in the right place at the right time. But none of them knew that at night, she led America's most dangerous operations. Until that night when everything changed. Behind Maya's pink stethoscope hanging in her locker was something no one could see: military badges, Special Forces decorations, and most importantly, a medal only 12 people possessed, from Operation Dark Angel. This operation appeared in no official records because it had never happened, at least not on paper. When hospital administrator Janet Williams hired Maya, her resume showed only nursing education. Johns Hopkins graduate, perfect references, praised during her internship. But Maya's real background ran much deeper. Before medical school, she'd graduated from Annapolis Naval Academy, then joined the Navy SEALs, and spent the last 8 years in Delta Force. Maya's hospital life was a perfect charade. At 6 a.m. shift start, while other nurses drank coffee, she reviewed patient files while reading encrypted messages on her phone. During lunch breaks, while colleagues gossiped, Maya stood alone on the roof, tactically assessing the city's skyline. When evening shifts ended and everyone went home, Maya's real work began. Tonight was different because the patient brought to emergency was different. As ambulance sirens wailed at the hospital entrance, Maya routinely rushed to the gurney. But when the man on the stretcher saw her, he froze. His bloodshot eyes recognized Maya. The words that escaped his lips shocked everyone. The wounded man mumbled something with trembling voice that made Maya's heart race, because those words contained Maya's real rank, Major Chen, a name only very few people knew. Maya quickly covered the patient's mouth and looked at the other nurses. Fortunately, no one had understood. But this was just the beginning. The wounded man was Jake Morrison, and Maya knew him from Afghanistan. They had both participated in the same classified operation. Jake being here wasn't coincidence. Something was going wrong, and Maya's two identities were about to collide. Jake's wounds were gunshot wounds, and recent ones. He had been shot within the last 24 hours. Maya acted unhurried while taking Jake to surgery, but actually, she was making tactical plans in her mind. Jake being here meant there was an active operation in Denver, and if Jake was wounded, the operation was going badly. Maya had to make a choice: protect her nurse identity or intervene with her soldier identity. During surgery, Jake continued mumbling unconsciously. When Maya leaned closer, what Jake said froze her. Project Chimera. Maya knew this project very well because she had participated in it, but Chimera had been canceled 3 years ago, or so it was believed. Jake mentioning it meant the project was still active. When Maya left surgery, her cell phone was vibrating. The message was encrypted, but Maya knew the code very well. Angel 6 emergency meeting, 200 hours, Point Delta. Maya's shift lasted until 6 a.m., but this message was more important than anything. Angel 6 was Maya's Delta Force codename, and Point Delta was the secret meeting point outside the city. Maya approached head nurse Susan and requested early departure, claiming sudden stomach pain. Susan knew Maya never got sick, but didn't object. Maya went to the locker room and opened her locker's hidden compartment. As she removed her nurse uniform, another world emerged underneath. black tactical clothing, Kevlar vest, special forces equipment. As Maya left the hospital, she walked to her Honda Civic in the parking lot. But the car wasn't normal. The engine was modified, windows were bulletproof, and the console was filled with military communication equipment. As Maya started the engine, she wondered how long this double life could continue. The line between two identities was becoming increasingly blurred. Arriving at Point Delta, Maya carefully examined her surroundings. At 2 a.m., the abandoned factory building outside the city was silent. But looking with trained eyes, Maya noticed security cameras, hidden sensors, and figures waiting in strategic positions. This wasn't an innocent meeting point. The person waiting for Maya inside the factory building surprised her. Commander Richards, a Delta Force officer Maya had worked with 5 years ago. Richards being here showed how serious the situation was. Richards usually worked at the Pentagon, not in the field. If he had come this far, the crisis was major. When Richards looked at Maya, he smiled, but there was worry in his eyes. Maya wore tactical uniform instead of nurse clothes, and this change had taken seconds. Richards was pleased to see Maya was still professional, but what he was about to say would completely change Maya's double life. Richards explained, Project Chimera was indeed continuing, but it was no longer an official operation. Former Delta Force operators were acting on their own and had gotten involved in dangerous business. Jake Morrison was one of this group, and when he saw Maya, he panicked and leaked information about the group. Now Maya's identity was in danger. Questions multiplied in Maya's mind. If Jake being at the hospital wasn't coincidence, then the former Delta Force group had been tracking Maya. She couldn't estimate how long they had known her nurse identity. And if her hospital position was compromised, what would she do? The perfect nurse life she had maintained for 3 years could collapse instantly. Richards continued, Maya's position at the hospital was strategically very valuable because Denver Mercy Hospital was where all military personnel in the city received treatment. Agents wounded in classified operations, diplomats requiring special security, all came here. Maya gathered intelligence from this position and intervened when necessary. But now, both of Maya's identities were in danger. The rogue Delta Force group wanted to neutralize her because Maya was in a position to learn their plans. And if her hospital colleagues learned Maya's real identity, it would become impossible for them to trust her. Maya was cornered. Richards offered Maya 3 options. First, completely abandon her nurse identity and return to Delta Force. Second, quit her hospital job and take a new identity in another city. Third, neutralize the rogue group while protecting both identities. This option was the riskiest, but also the most appealing to Maya. Maya asked for time to think. Richards gave her 48 hours and Maya returned to the hospital. The morning shift had started, and Maya continued her work as if nothing had happened. But now she looked at every patient, every colleague differently. Any of them could be spies for the rogue group. Jake Morrison was conscious but not talking. When Maya entered his room, the fear in Jake's eyes was obvious. Maya approached him, and Jake whispered something. They're in the hospital. These words froze Maya's heart. The rogue group had infiltrated the hospital. Maya began carefully observing her surroundings. New nurses, security guards hired in recent months, even cleaning staff. Anyone could be watching Maya. She was trying to determine whether Maya's paranoia was real or an actual threat. During lunch break that day, Maya went to the hospital roof. While looking at the city view, her cell phone rang. The caller wasn't familiar, but the voice was very familiar. Former Delta Force colleague Marcus Webb. Marcus had left the group 2 years ago, and Maya had never heard from him. Marcus calling wasn't a good sign. Marcus warned Maya on the phone. The rogue group had learned Maya's hospital routine. They knew what time she was where, which days she worked in which departments. And tonight, when Maya's shift ended, they would catch her leaving the hospital. Marcus had taken a big risk to warn Maya. Maya's time was running out. She tried to act normal during the evening shift but was making plans in her mind. Could she exit the hospital safely, or was she forced to confront the rogue group? Maya was calculating what she could do to protect her innocent nurse identity at the hospital. At midnight, Maya finished her shift. She stood in the locker room and looked at the hidden compartment in her locker. Would she wear her nurse uniform and leave, or use Delta Force equipment? Her choice could completely change Maya's life. And footsteps were heard in the hospital corridors. Someone was approaching her. Maya held her breath and listened to the door. The footsteps sounded familiar, but she wasn't sure. She took her tactical knife from the locker and positioned herself by the door. The door slowly opened, and the person who entered surprised Maya. It was Hospital Administrator Janet Williams, but Janet had a gun in her hand. When Janet looked at Maya, she smiled, but that smile wasn't genuine. When Janet spoke, her voice was cold, and Maya understood her real identity. Janet Williams wasn't just a hospital administrator. She was also a member of the rogue group and had been watching Maya for 3 years. Maya's perfect nurse performance at the hospital had actually been constantly monitored. Janet explained how she learned about Maya's Delta Force background. The rogue group tracked former operators and tried to use them for their own purposes. Maya's position at the hospital was very valuable because it provided access to critical intelligence sources. Janet would try to obtain this information by forcing Maya. Maya quietly took position. Even after 3 years of nursing, her tactical reflexes had never dulled. Janet threatening her with a gun wasn't new for Maya, but having a confrontation here at the hospital in nurse uniform would completely expose Maya's double life. Maya made a decision. She slowly approached Janet and began talking. She was trying to protect her nurse identity, attempting to appear defenseless, but at the same time, she was assessing Janet's position, making attack plans. She needed to maintain perfect balance between two identities. Janet approached, fooled by Maya's defenseless behavior, and at that moment, Maya acted. Years of Delta Force training kicked in. She neutralized Janet's weapon, brought her down, and controlled her without making any sound. All this happened in seconds, and no one in the hospital corridors noticed. Maya began interrogating Janet. What were the rogue group's plans? Who else was in the hospital? How long had they been watching Maya? Janet initially resisted but couldn't withstand Maya's interrogation techniques. The truth was much bigger than Maya expected. The rogue group wasn't just targeting Maya, they were monitoring all military patients and personnel in the hospital. Their goal was to gather information about active military operations and sell this information to the highest bidder. Maya's position at the hospital was central to this plan because she could both access information and not arouse suspicion. Maya locked Janet in a secure place and called Richards. The situation was now out of control. Hospital security was compromised, and Maya's dual identity was no longer sustainable. Richards would send an emergency response team, but Maya's nursing career at the hospital was over. But Maya was thinking of a different plan. Maybe she didn't have to completely lose her nurse identity. If she could secretly neutralize the rogue group, she could continue her normal life at the hospital. This was a very risky plan, but Maya was used to taking risks. Maya accessed the hospital security system and examined Janet's activities over recent months. Janet wasn't just the hospital administrator. She was also the person who controlled who was admitted to the hospital and which patients had access to what information. Maya followed the traces of Janet's connections with the rogue group. Toward morning, Maya saw the big picture. The rogue group wasn't just using the hospital to gather information, they were also using it to target wounded soldiers. Some patients were being interrogated instead of treated, and some mysteriously disappeared. Maya had to stop this situation. Maya made her final decision. She would collapse the rogue group from within while protecting her nurse identity. This required her to use both identities perfectly. Innocent nurse by day, deadly agent by night. Maya Chen would perform this double life one last time, and this time she would win permanently. Maya took her Delta Force equipment from the locker, but also kept her nurse uniform with her, because tonight she would need to use both her nurse and soldier identities. The boundary between two worlds was about to be completely erased. Maya stepped into the hospital corridor with calculated precision, her tactical vest hidden beneath the nurse's cardigan, weapon concealed in the medical supply bag she carried. The fluorescent lights cast long shadows as she moved through familiar territory that had now become a battlefield. Each footstep was deliberate, each breath controlled, the innocent nurse facade masking the predator beneath. The security cameras tracked her movement, but Maya knew their blind spots intimately. 3 years of studying every angle, every vulnerability of this building would now serve a different purpose. She slipped past the main desk where night staff dozed, unaware that war had come to their sterile sanctuary. Maya's trained eyes identified the positions she needed to reach: the server room, the administrative offices, and the basement storage area where she suspected the rogue operations were coordinated. Her phone buzzed with an encrypted message: location coordinates within the hospital. The rogue team was converging on her position, but they didn't know Maya had already identified their movements. She had spent the last hour studying their patterns through the security feeds, mapping their positions like pieces on a chessboard. They thought they were hunters, but Maya had transformed them into prey without them realizing it. The first target waited in the basement. Maya descended the service stairs, her medical bag creating the perfect cover for the lethal equipment within. The basement corridors smelled of antiseptic and industrial cleaning supplies, but underneath, Maya detected something else: fear. Someone was down here who didn't belong, someone whose breathing patterns indicated high stress and tactical awareness. Maya rounded the corner and saw him. Former Delta Force operative Kevin Torres, positioned near the hospital's main electrical systems. His hands worked quickly on what appeared to be explosive devices. The plan was becoming clear. They intended to create chaos, force evacuations, and extract their targets in the confusion. Maya couldn't allow the hospital to become their battlefield, with innocent patients caught in the crossfire. Torres sensed movement and turned, his weapon rising instinctively. But Maya was already in motion, her nurse's uniform becoming a blur as she closed the distance. Years of hand-to-hand combat training compressed into seconds of fluid violence. Torres's finger never reached the trigger. Maya's strike to his carotid artery dropped him silently to the concrete floor. The explosives required careful disarmament, a skill set that proved invaluable as she rendered them inert with surgical precision. One down, but the real challenge lay ahead. Maya's earpiece crackled with intercepted communications. The rogue team had discovered Torres' silence and were moving to investigate. Maya had perhaps 10 minutes before they reached the basement. She photographed the explosive evidence, transmitted the images to Richards, then moved to her next objective: the server room where the group's digital operations were coordinated. The server room hummed with electronic activity, banks of computers processing stolen medical records and classified patient information. Maya's technical training allowed her to quickly identify the primary data storage units. But as she began the data extraction process, footsteps echoed in the corridor outside, multiple operators moving with professional stealth. Maya finished the download and prepared for what was coming. The door burst open, and 3 figures entered in tactical formation. Former special forces, their movements betraying years of combat experience. But they had made one critical error. They expected to find the innocent nurse Maya, not the predator she had become. The server room's confined space worked to Maya's advantage, limiting their ability to use superior numbers effectively. Maya's first strike eliminated the lead operator's night vision advantage, plunging the room into darkness. In the chaos that followed, her intimate knowledge of the room's layout became a devastating weapon. Equipment racks provided cover and concealment as she systematically dismantled their tactical advantage. Each operator fell silently, professionally, permanently. The server room became a tomb for their ambitions. Moving through the hospital's upper floors, Maya encountered the final elements of the rogue operation. They had taken positions in the intensive care unit, using critical patients as human shields. This was the scenario Maya had dreaded most. Her two worlds colliding in a space where her duty as a healer conflicted with her role as a warrior. But Maya had spent 3 years learning every patient's condition, every piece of medical equipment, every possible angle of approach. The leader of the rogue group, former Major David Kremlin, stood behind the nurses' station with 2 remaining operatives. They had tactical advantages, superior positioning, hostages, and the element of surprise they believed they still possessed. But Maya knew something they didn't. Every camera in this ward fed directly to her phone. Every ventilation shaft could conceal her movement, and every piece of medical equipment could become a weapon in trained hands. Maya's approach was methodical, invisible. She moved through the ceiling spaces above the ward, mapping positions through thermal imaging on her device. The rogue operatives had military discipline, but they lacked Maya's intimate knowledge of this terrain. She emerged behind their positions like a ghost, using the life support machines and monitoring equipment to mask her movements. The final confrontation lasted less than 90 seconds. Maya's strikes were precise, calculated to incapacitate without endangering the patients whose lives hung in the balance around them. Kremlin's combat skills were impressive, but he was fighting an enemy who knew every inch of the battlefield, every possible advantage, every weakness in his position. When silence returned to the ICU, only Maya remained standing. As dawn broke over Denver, emergency responders secured the hospital. Richards arrived with a federal task force to process the evidence and manage the aftermath. The official story would involve a terrorist cell attempting to infiltrate the medical facility, their plot foiled by alert security and rapid federal response. Maya's name would appear nowhere in the reports. In the morning briefing, hospital staff gathered to hear about the night's events. Maya sat among her colleagues wearing her nurse's uniform, listening to the official version with the same shocked expression as everyone else. To them, she remained the quiet, reliable night shift nurse who had somehow slept through the entire incident at home. Her double life had survived its ultimate test. Dr. Patricia Walsh, the chief of staff, announced increased security measures and commended the staff's professionalism during the crisis. Maya nodded along with the others, already planning her next shift schedule. Because the hospital still needed its nurses, and Maya Chen had proven she could be exactly what was needed, when it was needed, without anyone ever knowing the difference. Months later, Maya continued her work in the emergency department. New patients arrived, new challenges emerged, but the rogue threat had been eliminated permanently. Sometimes, late at night, she would pause in the basement corridors or the server room, remembering the shadows that had once threatened this place. But those shadows were gone now, and Maya had ensured they would never return. Her phone buzzed with another encrypted message. A new mission, a new threat to national security that required her unique skill set. Maya glanced around the quiet hospital ward, checked that her patients were stable, then quietly made her way to the locker room. Because Maya Chen would always answer the call, no matter which uniform she wore when duty demanded her service. The boundary between her two identities hadn't been erased after all, it had been perfected. Stories like Maya's remind us that courage doesn't always wear a uniform, and heroes don't always seek recognition. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs to remember that strength can hide behind the gentlest smile. Subscribe for more untold stories of sacrifice, courage, and the hidden warriors who protect us all. And remember, the person sitting next to you might just be someone extraordinary hiding in plain sight. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next story.